The moment Sarah Grace saw the two horses her uncle was admiring, she knew her life was about to change forever, and not in the way a 19-year-old woman dreams about during sleepless nights in a dusty Colorado mining camp. It was the summer of 1878, and Park City, Colorado, was still relatively young, carved out of the harsh mountain terrain by men who believed fortune lay buried beneath rock and soil. Sarah had arrived 3 months earlier with her Uncle Morton after her parents died from fever back in Missouri. She had nobody else, no other family willing to take in an orphan who could barely cook and whose hands were too soft for real work. Morton Grace had agreed to let her come west with him, but his kindness had limits that became clearer with each passing week. The two horses were magnificent animals. One a dappled gray mare with intelligent eyes, the other a strong bay gelding that looked like it could work all day without complaint. They stood tied to the hitching post outside the general store, and Morton's eyes gleamed with the kind of greed Sarah had seen before when he looked at whiskey bottles or marked cards. "Those are fine horses," Morton said to the tall man who emerged from the store carrying supplies. "Real fine horses." The man was younger than Sarah expected, perhaps 23 or 24, with dark hair that fell slightly into hazel eyes that had seen too much sun and wind. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots scuffed from hard riding. He glanced at Morton with the wariness of someone who had learned to judge character quickly out here where mistakes could be fatal. "They serve me well enough," the man said, his voice carrying a slight Texas drawl. He began loading his supplies into the saddlebags with efficient movements. "I'm Morton Grace. This here's my niece Sarah." Morton gestured toward her carelessly, like she was another piece of inventory. "We've been in Park City a few months now. I've been working some claims up in the hills." The man nodded politely but kept working. Sarah noticed his hands were capable and scarred, the hands of someone who worked with horses and rope and probably a branding iron. "I'm Isaac Ross," he said finally, because it would have been rude not to offer his name in return. "I run cattle down in the valley, bring them up through here sometimes on the way to better grazing." "Cattle," Morton repeated, as if the word itself was valuable. "That's honest work, hard work." "It is," Isaac agreed. He glanced at Sarah briefly, and she saw something flicker in his expression, perhaps surprised that she was looking back at him with such desperate intensity. She did not know why she was staring, only that something about this stranger felt different from the rough miners and gamblers who populated Park City. "I don't suppose you'd be interested in a trade," Morton said suddenly, and Sarah's stomach dropped because she recognized that tone. It was the same one he used when he was about to do something that would benefit only himself. Isaac paused, his hand on the saddle. "What kind of trade?" "Those horses for my niece." The words hung in the mountain air like smoke. Sarah stopped breathing. She had known Morton was tired of feeding her, tired of her taking up space in his cramped cabin, tired of her failure to earn her keep in a town where women either worked in the saloons or took in laundry or married quickly. But she had not imagined this. Isaac Ross turned slowly to face Morton, and his expression had gone cold. "Excuse me. Sarah here, she's a good girl, healthy, young. She can cook, clean, do whatever needs doing. She's worth more than 2 horses, but I can see you take good care of animals, so I figure you'd take good care of her too. And I need horses like those if I'm going to work my claims properly." Sarah wanted to disappear into the wooden planks of the storefront. Several people on the street had stopped to listen, and she could feel their eyes on her like brands. Her face burned with humiliation and fury and fear all mixed together, until she thought she might be sick right there. Isaac looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his face that was not quite pity but close to it. He saw a girl in a faded calico dress that had been mended too many times, brown hair pulled back in a simple braid, hazel eyes that were fighting back tears of rage and shame. He saw someone being traded like property. "That's not how things are done," Isaac said quietly. "Not anymore. War ended that. She's my niece, my responsibility. I can make arrangements for her future as I see fit. You don't want her, fine, but someone in this town will trade me something of value for her. Girl like her, she won't last long unmarried in a place like this anyway. At least I'm trying to find her a good situation." The lie was transparent. Morton wanted those horses and would say anything to get them. He had probably been planning this since he first saw them. Isaac was silent for a long moment. Sarah could see him thinking, see calculations happening behind those hazel eyes. Finally, he said, "I'll make you a deal. I'll trade you the horses for Sarah, but once the trade is done, she's free to make her own choices. She can stay with me or go where she pleases. That's the only way this happens." Morton laughed. Sure, whatever you want to tell yourself. Once the trade's made, she's your problem, not mine. I got no interest in what happens after." "I need to hear it from her," Isaac said, looking at Sarah. "Miss Grace, do you understand what's being discussed here?" Sarah found her voice, though it came out rougher than she intended. "My uncle wants to trade me to you like I'm livestock. You want to make the trade but set me free afterward. Why would you give up two good horses for nothing?" "Because your uncle is right about one thing. A young woman alone in Park City does not have a lot of good options. If I make this trade, at least you'll have a choice about what happens next. If I don't make it, he'll trade you to someone else, someone who might not give you any choice at all." Sarah looked at her uncle and saw no compassion there, no family loyalty, nothing but impatience to conclude this transaction and get his horses. She looked at Isaac Ross and saw a stranger, but a stranger who was at least being honest with her about his intentions. "All right," she said. "Make the trade." Morton grinned and stuck out his hand. Isaac shook it reluctantly, then untied both horses and handed over the reins. Morton took them with the satisfaction of a man who had just won something valuable. He did not say goodbye to Sarah, did not offer her any money or supplies or even a kind word. He simply mounted the gray mare, took the gelding's lead rope, and rode away toward his cabin without looking back. Sarah stood on the wooden sidewalk with her entire life reduced to the dress she wore and the shoes on her feet. Isaac Ross was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "I need to get my supplies to my camp," he said. "It's about 2 hours' ride from here. I've got a pack mule, but you'll have to ride behind me on my horse if you're coming. Or I can give you some money and you can stay in town, find work or passage somewhere else. Your choice." "I have nowhere to go," Sarah said. "No money, no family except the uncle who just traded me for horses." "What kind of choice is that? The kind where you decide what happens next instead of someone else deciding for you. It is not much, but it is more than you had 5 minutes ago." He was right about that. Sarah took a shaky breath and looked around Park City. She had been miserable here, living in Morton's cramped cabin, eating thin soup and stale bread, listening to him come home drunk and angry about his claims not paying out. The town itself was rough, full of desperate men chasing dreams of silver and gold. There was nothing for her here. "I will come to your camp," she said. "At least for tonight. I need time to think." Isaac nodded. "Fair enough." He had a solid brown horse that was not as flashy as the two he had given up but looked strong and reliable. He mounted easily, then reached down to help Sarah up behind him. She hesitated for just a moment before taking his hand. His grip was firm and steady as he pulled her up. She settled behind the saddle, unsure where to put her hands. "You'll need to hold on," Isaac said. "Trail can get rough." Sarah reluctantly put her hands on his waist, feeling awkward and strange. She had never been this close to a man who was not family. She could feel the warmth of him through his shirt, smell the scent of leather and horse and clean sweat. They rode out of Park City in the late afternoon, the pack mule following on a lead rope. The mountain air was crisp and clear, pine trees rising up on either side of the trail. Sarah tried to take in the beauty of the landscape, but her mind kept spinning with what had just happened. Traded for horses, set free, choice. The words rattled around without quite making sense. "Where are you from originally?" Isaac asked after a while. His voice was not quite friendly but not unfriendly either. "Missouri. Small town outside St. Louis. My parents had a farm. They died from fever this spring. Morton was my mother's brother. He agreed to take me in, but I think he regretted it almost immediately. I'm sorry about your parents. Thank you." Sarah paused, then asked, "What about you? You sound like you're from somewhere south." "Texas. Grew up on a ranch outside Austin. Came up to Colorado a few years back with a cattle drive and decided I liked the mountains. Been working my own small herd ever since." "Why did you agree to trade your horses for me? Those were fine animals. You could have just walked away." Isaac was quiet for long enough that Sarah thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "My mother was Mexican. My father was a white rancher who hired her family during roundups. They fell in love, got married, and for a while things were good. But I grew up watching people treat my mother like she was property, like she was less than human because of who she was. When your uncle said he was trading you, all I could think was that nobody should be traded like they do not matter." Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. "I did not know that still happened. I mean, I knew about before the war, but I thought things were different now." "They are different, but not different enough. Out here, people still think they can make whatever arrangements they want if they have something someone else desires. Your uncle knew that." They rode in silence for a while longer. The trail wound down out of the higher elevations into a valley that opened up green and beautiful in the slanting afternoon light. Sarah could see cattle grazing in the distance, scattered across the grassland like dark stones. A creek ran through the middle of the valley, lined with cottonwood trees. "That's my land," Isaac said, and there was pride in his voice. "Leased from the government, but I've been working it for 3 years now. Built a cabin over there near the tree line. It is not much, but it is mine." The cabin came into view as they rode closer. It was small but solidly built, with a good roof and a stone chimney. There was a corral for horses, a small barn, and what looked like a root cellar dug into the hillside. Everything was neat and well maintained, the work of someone who took pride in what they built. Isaac dismounted and helped Sarah down, then immediately began unsaddling his horse and unpacking the mule. Sarah stood awkwardly, unsure what to do with herself. "You can go inside if you want," Isaac said without looking up from his work. "There's water in the bucket by the door, food in the cupboard if you are hungry. I need to take care of the animals." Sarah went into the cabin and looked around. It was simple but clean. A bed in one corner with a thick quilt, a table with 2 chairs, a stove for cooking and heat, shelves with supplies, everything organized and practical. The home of a man who lived alone but had not given up on basic comforts. She found the water bucket and drank from the dipper, suddenly realizing how thirsty she was. There was bread wrapped in cloth on the table, and she tore off a piece and ate it slowly. It was good bread, better than anything Morton had provided. Through the open door, she could see Isaac working with his horse and mule, brushing them down, checking their hooves, giving them grain from a barrel in the barn. He moved with the ease of long practice, talking to the animals in a low voice she could not quite hear. There was something peaceful about watching him work, something that made the knot of fear in her stomach loosen slightly. When Isaac finally came inside, The sun was setting and the cabin was filling with shadows. He lit a lamp and looked at Sarah, who was sitting at the table trying to decide what came next. "You must be exhausted," he said. "I can sleep in the barn tonight. You take the bed." "I cannot take your bed," Sarah protested. "This is your home, and you have had a terrible day. Take the bed." "I have slept in the barn plenty of times. It is not a hardship. But you gave up your horses for me. You should not also have to give up your bed." Isaac pulled out the other chair and sat down across from her. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. I did not buy you. I made a trade that put you in a position to make your own choices, but you do not owe me anything. Not gratitude, not service, not anything else. Tomorrow morning, if you want to go back to Park City, I will take you. If you want me to help you get passage somewhere else, I will do that. If you want to stay here for a while and figure things out, you can do that too. But whatever you choose, it is your choice. You understand?" Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. "Why are you being kind to me? You do not even know me." "Because kindness should not require knowing someone. Because you deserve better than what happened to you today. Because it is the right thing to do." The tears spilled over and Sarah wiped them away angrily. "I am sorry. I am not usually like this. You are allowed to cry. It has been a hard day." They sat in silence while Sarah got control of herself. Outside, crickets were beginning their evening song and the last light was fading from the sky. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said finally. "Of course." "What did you mean when you said I could stay here and figure things out? Stay how?" "Doing what?" Isaac leaned back in his chair. "I could use help around the place. The cattle need checking every day, which means I am out in the valley most of the time. That leaves all the work here at the cabin. Garden needs tending, animals need feeding, food needs cooking, clothes need mending. I have been doing it all myself, but it would be easier with help. If you wanted to work for me, I could pay you wages, give you room and board plus money so you could save up for whatever comes next." "You mean hire me?" "Yes, as an employee. Someone who works for wages and can leave any time they want." Sarah thought about it. "What kind of wages? What's fair? I do not know what women get paid for housework. You tell me." She had no idea either. "I do not know. I have never been paid for anything." "All right, how about this? Room and board plus $20 a month. If that is not enough, we can negotiate." $20 a month was more than Sarah had ever imagined having. "That seems like a lot. The work is hard and you would be somewhat isolated out here. It is fair compensation." Sarah looked around the cabin again, seeing it differently now. Not a prison, but a possibility. A place where she could work and save money and maybe figure out who she was without an uncle telling her she was worthless or a town making her feel invisible. "I will try it," she said. "For a month. If it does not work out, I will leave." Isaac nodded. "That sounds reasonable. We will start tomorrow. Tonight, just rest." He got up and gathered a blanket from the chest at the foot of the bed. "I will be in the barn if you need anything. Bar the door after I leave if it makes you feel safer." After he left, Sarah did bar the door, then sat on the edge of the bed and tried to understand how her life had changed so completely in just a few hours. This morning, she had woken up in Morton's cabin, feeling trapped and hopeless. Tonight she was in a stranger's home, offered wages and choices and kindness. She did not know if she could trust Isaac Ross. She did not know if this was real or some kind of trap. But she was too tired to think about it anymore. She lay down on the bed, still wearing her dress, and pulled the quilt over herself. It smelled like pine and fresh air. She fell asleep almost immediately. When Sarah woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the cabin's single window and she could hear sounds outside. She got up and looked out to see Isaac working in the corral with a young horse, teaching it to accept a saddle. He was patient with the animal, speaking quietly, never raising his voice even when the horse spooked and pulled away. Sarah found the wash basin and cleaned up as best she could, wishing she had different clothes or at least a hairbrush. When she ventured outside, Isaac looked up and nodded. "There is coffee on the stove inside," he called, "and I put some bacon and eggs on the table for breakfast. Help yourself." The food was still warm. Sarah ate gratefully, then washed the dishes in the basin. When Isaac came back inside, she was looking through the cupboards trying to figure out what supplies he had. "I usually head out to check the cattle right after breakfast," Isaac said. "I will be back around midday. You can start by looking around, figuring out where things are, seeing what needs doing. There is no rush." "All right." Sarah hesitated, then asked, "Do you have an extra shirt I could borrow and maybe some pants? A dress is not practical for work." Isaac looked surprised but pleased. "Sure. Let me find something." He rummaged through the chest and came up with a shirt and a pair of pants that were too big for her but workable. "You can roll up the cuffs, and there is a belt that might help with the waist." Sarah took the clothes and changed behind a blanket Isaac hung for privacy. The pants felt strange but liberating. She had never worn men's clothing before. She rolled up the cuffs and cinched the belt tight and felt ready to actually work. Isaac was trying not to smile when she emerged. "You look like a ranch hand." "Good. I want to be useful." He left to check on his cattle, and Sarah spent the morning exploring the property. The garden was overgrown with weeds but had good bones: tomato plants, bean poles, squash vines, herbs. She spent several hours weeding and watering, falling into the familiar rhythm of farm work she remembered from her childhood. The chickens in the coop needed fresh water and feed. The barn needed mucking out. There was laundry that needed washing. Sarah made a mental list of everything that needed doing and started working through it systematically. When Isaac returned at midday, he found Sarah hanging wet clothes on a line she had strung between two trees. "You have been busy," he said, looking around at the weeded garden and clean barn. "There is a lot to do, but it is good work, honest work." They ate a simple lunch of bread and cheese, then Isaac said, "I need to ride up into the high pastures this afternoon to check on some cattle that grazed up there. It will take a few hours. Will you be all right here alone?" "Of course." "I am not afraid of being alone. There is a rifle inside above the door, just in case, though you should not need it." After Isaac left, Sarah went back to work. She found satisfaction in taking something messy or broken and making it better. By the time evening came and Isaac returned, she had cleaned the cabin thoroughly, prepared a stew for dinner, and even mended several tears in his spare shirts. "This is amazing," Isaac said, looking around the transformed cabin. "I did not expect you to do all this in one day. I like working. It feels good to be useful." They ate dinner together, talking about the cattle and the property and what needed doing next. It felt almost normal, like they were business partners rather than strangers thrown together by an ugly circumstance. That night, Isaac again slept in the barn without complaint. The pattern continued for the next week. Sarah worked hard during the day, transforming the homestead from a bachelor's rough camp into something more organized and livable. Isaac treated her with unfailing courtesy and respect, never assuming anything, always asking before he came into a space she was occupying. Slowly, Sarah began to relax. She began to believe that Isaac meant what he said, that she was truly free to leave if she wanted. But she found she did not want to leave. The work was hard but satisfying. The valley was beautiful, and Isaac was unlike any man she had ever known. He was quiet but not cold, competent but not arrogant. He worked from dawn to dusk without complaint. He cared for his animals with a gentleness that surprised her. He never raised his voice, never drank to excess, never made her feel uncomfortable or afraid. One evening, about 2 weeks after Sarah arrived, they were sitting outside the cabin watching the sun set over the mountains. The air was cool and pine-scented. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sarah said. "Sure." "Why do you live out here alone? You are young, hardworking, kind. You could have a family, a wife." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "I was engaged once, back in Texas. Girl named Margaret from a good family. When she found out about my mother being Mexican, she ended things. Said her family would never accept it. That was when I decided to come north, start over somewhere people did not know my history. That must have hurt." "It did, but it also taught me something about what matters. I would rather be alone than be with someone who thinks family and heritage are things to be ashamed of. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was. She died when I was 16. Influenza. My father never really recovered. He sold the ranch and moved back east to live with his brother. I stayed in Texas until that situation with Margaret, then came up here." Sarah felt a wave of sympathy for this man who had lost so much. "I am sorry. Life happens. You make the best of what you get." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Sarah found herself studying Isaac's profile in the fading light, noticing things she had not paid attention to before. The strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar, the capable look of his hands resting on his knees. She realized with a start that she was attracted to him. Not just grateful or appreciative of his kindness, but actually attracted. The realization made her blush and look away quickly. Over the following weeks, Sarah's feelings continued to grow. She found herself looking forward to Isaac returning from his work each day. She took extra care with cooking, trying to make meals he would enjoy. She laughed at his dry jokes and listened to his stories about cattle and horses. She caught herself watching him work, admiring his easy competence with difficult tasks. Isaac seemed to be changing too, though more subtly. He smiled more often. He lingered at meals, talking long after the food was gone. He started doing small, thoughtful things like bringing her wildflowers from the high meadows, or saving the best cuts of meat when he butchered a chicken one day in late August, nearly 2 months after Sarah's arrival. Isaac came back from town with supplies and a package wrapped in brown paper. "I got you something," he said, looking almost shy. "You have been working so hard and you only have that one dress. I thought you might like something new." Sarah unwrapped the package to find a beautiful calico dress in deep blue with white flowers. It was simple but well made, nicer than anything she had owned in years. "Isaac, this is too much. You are already paying me wages. You deserve nice things. Try it on." Sarah changed behind the privacy blanket and the dress fit perfectly. When she emerged, Isaac's expression made her heart skip. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Thank you." Sarah felt her cheeks heating. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." But something had shifted between them. The air felt charged with possibility. Sarah could feel her pulse racing. She stepped closer to Isaac, drawn by something she did not fully understand. "Isaac, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "When I first came here, I was planning to save my wages and leave as soon as I could. Go somewhere big like Denver or San Francisco, start a new life. But I do not want to leave anymore. I like being here. I like this valley and this cabin and the work. I like you." Isaac's hazel eyes were intense on hers. "I like you too, Sarah, more than I should probably admit." "Why should not you admit it?" "Because I do not want you to feel obligated. You came here because you had no choice, because your uncle traded you. I do not want you to think you owe me anything, including affection." Sarah reached out and took his hand. "I do not feel obligated. I feel something entirely different. Isaac, You are the kindest, most decent man I have ever known. What I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude or obligation and everything to do with who you are." "Sarah," he breathed, and then he was pulling her close and kissing her, and she was kissing him back with all the pent-up emotion of the past 2 months. His arms came around her waist, and hers went around his neck, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "I have wanted you to." "What does this mean? What do you want?" Sarah pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. "I want to stay here, not as an employee, but as your partner. I want to build a life with you. I want to be with you. Are you sure? You are still young. You could have other opportunities, other choices." "I am sure. I choose you. I choose this life." Isaac kissed her again, and this time it was deeper, more passionate. When they broke apart, he was smiling wider than Sarah had ever seen. "Then stay. Please stay. Not just for a month or a year, but for always. Marry me, Sarah. Be my wife." "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." That night, Isaac still slept in the barn because they were not married yet, and he insisted on doing things properly. But everything had changed. They were no longer strangers or employer and employee. They were two people who had found each other in unlikely circumstances and chosen to build something together. They were married 3 weeks later by a circuit preacher who came through Park City. Sarah wore her blue calico dress and wildflowers in her hair. Isaac wore his best shirt and looked nervous and happy. They exchanged simple vows in front of the preacher and 2 witnesses from town. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed Sarah like he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. And maybe he had. They rode back to the valley as the sun was setting, Sarah riding in front of Isaac now instead of behind, his arms around her waist holding the reins. The mountains were purple in the fading light, and the air smelled like autumn coming. That night, Isaac built up the fire in the cabin until it was warm and glowing. He undressed Sarah slowly, reverently, kissing each new inch of skin he revealed. Sarah had never been with a man before and was nervous, but Isaac was patient and gentle. He made sure she was comfortable, made sure she was ready before they came together fully. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed that was now theirs, not his or hers, but theirs. Sarah's head rested on Isaac's chest, and she could hear his heartbeat steady and strong. "I love you," Isaac said into the darkness. "I did not think I would ever say those words to anyone again after Margaret, but I love you, Sarah." "I love you too," Sarah whispered back. "Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for giving me a choice. Thank you for choosing me." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the fire burning low, the wind whispering through the pines outside. The first year of marriage was not easy. Running a cattle ranch was hard work, and there were challenges neither of them had anticipated. A hard winter that killed several head of cattle, a summer drought that dried up part of the creek, problems with predators going after the calves. Money was tight, and there were times when they wondered if they would make it, but they faced everything together. Sarah proved to be tough and resourceful, learning to ride well enough to help Isaac move cattle, learning to shoot to protect the herd from coyotes and mountain lions, learning to manage their meager finances so they could stretch every dollar. Isaac appreciated her partnership, never treating her as less capable or less important than himself. By their second anniversary, things were improving. The herd was growing. Isaac had negotiated a good contract to sell beef to the mining camps. They were able to expand their land lease and buy better equipment. The cabin got additions, a real bedroom and a larger kitchen. Sarah discovered she was pregnant in the spring of their 3rd year of marriage. When she told Isaac, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby," Sarah confirmed, laughing too despite her morning sickness. Their son was born in January of 1882, a healthy boy with Isaac's dark hair and Sarah's hazel eyes. They named him James Morton Ross, the middle name a complicated acknowledgement of Sarah's uncle. Despite everything, Morton had inadvertently brought Sarah and Isaac together. He had died the previous winter, drunk and alone in his cabin, his mining claim still worthless. Sarah felt sad for him but could not truly mourn a man who had cared so little for her. Little James was an easy baby, curious and happy. Isaac was a devoted father, carrying his son everywhere, talking to him constantly, showing him the cattle and horses as soon as James could hold up his head. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Lucy Margaret Ross. Sarah insisted on the middle name despite Isaac's protests. She said Margaret's rejection had brought Isaac to Colorado, and they should honor that journey even if it had been painful. Lucy was fierce and independent from birth, refusing to sleep when she was supposed to, demanding attention, making her presence known. Sarah and Isaac loved her stubbornly strong will even when it was exhausting. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1885, Isaac and Sarah owned their land outright instead of leasing it. They had a substantial herd and enough income to hire seasonal help during roundups. The cabin had grown into a proper ranch house with multiple bedrooms, a big kitchen, and a front porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch their children play. Sarah sometimes thought about the day Morton had traded her for 2 horses. She thought about how terrified and humiliated she had felt. She thought about Isaac's strange bargain, trading good horses for a stranger's freedom. She thought about the choice he had given her and the choice she had made. If someone had told her that day that she would end up happy, married to a good man with 2 beautiful children and a home she loved, she would not have believed it. But here she was, living a life better than anything she had imagined possible. One evening when James was 6 and Lucy was 4, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. James was telling an elaborate story about a horse he wanted to train. Lucy was catching fireflies in a jar. Isaac had his arm around Sarah's shoulders. Everything felt perfect. "Papa," James said suddenly, interrupting his own story. "How did you and Mama meet?" Isaac and Sarah looked at each other. They had known this question would come eventually, but they had not quite decided how to answer it. "That is a complicated story," Isaac said carefully. "I like stories," James insisted. Sarah took a breath. "Your mama's uncle made some poor choices and I ended up in a difficult situation. Your papa helped me when I needed it most. He gave me a chance to choose my own path." "What did you choose?" Lucy asked, abandoning her fireflies. "I chose your papa. I chose this ranch. I chose our family. And it was the best choice I ever made." "Why did Mama's uncle make poor choices?" James asked, because he was at the age where he wanted to understand everything. "Because sometimes people think about what they want instead of what is right," Isaac said. "They make decisions that hurt other people. Your great-uncle Morton was like that, but something good came from it anyway. Your mama and I found each other." "Are you glad Mama chose you?" Lucy asked. Isaac pulled Sarah closer. Every single day. As the children went back to their play, Sarah leaned into her husband's embrace. "Do you ever think about those horses? The ones you traded for me? Sometimes. They were fine horses. Do you regret it?" Isaac turned her face toward his and kissed her softly. "Not for a single second. I would trade 100 horses, 1,000 horses, everything I owned for you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Ross." "You set me free," Sarah said, "and I chose you. I will always choose you." The years continued to pass. each one bringing new challenges and joys. James grew into a serious boy who loved working with the cattle like his father. Lucy grew into a spirited girl who was more interested in riding fast horses than doing household chores. In 1888, Sarah gave birth to another son, Daniel Isaac Ross, who had his father's temperament and his mother's determination. The ranch expanded further. Isaac became known throughout Colorado as a fair and successful cattleman. Sarah earned a reputation as someone who could manage a household, raise children, and still work alongside her husband when needed. Other ranchers' wives came to her for advice. She became a respected figure in the small community that grew up around Park City. In 1890, when Sarah was 31 and Isaac was 35, they stood on the porch of their ranch house and looked out over the valley. The grass was green and thick. Cattle dotted the landscape. Their 3 children were playing near the creek, James teaching Lucy and Daniel how to skip stones. "Do you remember the first day you brought me here?" Sarah asked. "I remember everything about that day. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met. You had just been traded like property, and you still had dignity and strength. I remember thinking you must be insane to give up 2 good horses for a stranger. I thought there had to be a catch. The only catch was that I fell in love with you." Sarah leaned against her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady presence that had been her anchor for 12 years. "I was traded for 2 horses and I got a whole life in return, a good life, a beautiful life. We built this together," Isaac reminded her. "I gave you a choice, but you did all the hard work of choosing. You stayed when you could have left. You worked when things got difficult. You loved me when I was not sure I deserved it. You deserve everything good, Isaac Ross. Everything." He kissed the top of her head. "So do you." Down by the creek, James called out that he had skipped a stone 7 times. Lucy insisted she could do better. Daniel was already searching for the perfect flat rock. Their voices carried across the valley, full of life and joy and promise. Sarah thought about the young girl she had been, standing on a street in Park City, feeling like her life was over. She thought about the cowboy who had seen her humanity when her own uncle had not. She thought about the choice she had made and all the choices that came after. Every day for 12 years, she had chosen Isaac. She had chosen their life together. She had chosen love over fear, partnership over independence, this valley over anywhere else in the world. And every day, Isaac had chosen her back. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and deep purple, Sarah Grace Ross stood with her husband and watched their children play. She felt the baby she was carrying flutter inside her belly, another life they had created together, another choice made and honored. She had been traded for 2 horses. The cowboy had set her free, and she had chosen to stay. It was the best choice she ever made, and she would make it again every single day for the rest of her life. The years turned into decades. James grew up and married a school teacher from Denver, bringing her back to the ranch and eventually building his own house on the northern edge of the property. Lucy shocked everyone by becoming one of the first female veterinarians in Colorado, going to college back east and returning to care for ranch animals throughout the region. Daniel followed his father's path into cattle ranching, taking over more of the daily operations as Isaac grew older. The 4th child, another daughter named Clara Ruth Ross, was born in 1891 and grew up spirited and creative, eventually becoming a painter whose landscapes of Colorado captured the beauty Sarah and Isaac saw every day. Through it all, Sarah and Isaac remained devoted to each other. They were partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together, supporting each other through losses and celebrating victories side by side. When cattle prices crashed, They weathered it together. When drought struck, they endured it together. When children married or grandchildren were born, they celebrated together. In 1903, when Sarah was 44 and Isaac was 49, they sat on their porch on a summer evening much like that first evening so many years ago. Their children were grown now, building their own lives, but the valley remained the same, green and beautiful under the endless sky. "We have had a good life," Isaac said, reaching for Sarah's hand. "The best life," Sarah agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not been in Park City that day? If I had not seen what your uncle was doing?" Sarah squeezed his hand. "I try not to think about it. Someone else would have traded for me, probably someone who would not have set me free. My life would have been very different. I cannot imagine my life without you. I cannot imagine mine without you either. You gave me everything, Isaac, not just freedom, but love and partnership and family. You gave me a reason to believe in goodness again. You gave me those same things. After Margaret, I thought I would be alone forever. I thought I was not meant for love or family. But then you came into my life and changed everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains with light. After 25 years of marriage, they did not always need words. They could communicate in glances and touches and shared sighs. "I would do it again," Isaac said suddenly. "Do what? Trade those horses for you? Make that same choice?" "Even knowing everything that would come after, all the hard times and struggles, I would still make that trade. You were worth 100 horses, 1,000. You were worth everything." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I would choose you again too, every single time, in every possible world. You are my home, Isaac Ross. Not this ranch or this valley, but you." Isaac pulled her close and kissed her like they were young again, like it was their wedding night, like they had all the time in the world. And maybe they did. Maybe love stretches time in ways that cannot be measured in years or days or moments. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah rested her head on Isaac's shoulder and looked out at the land they had built together, the legacy they were leaving for their children. She thought about the scared 19-year-old girl who had been traded for 2 horses. She thought about the cowboy who had seen her worth when others had not. She thought about the choice that had changed everything. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For seeing me. For setting me free. For loving me. Thank you for staying," Isaac whispered back. "Thank you for choosing me." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah Grace Ross and Isaac James Ross sat together on their porch, holding hands, watching the valley they loved settle into evening. They had been young once, brought together by circumstance and cruelty. But they had built something beautiful from that ugly beginning. They had chosen love and partnership and commitment every single day for 25 years. And they would continue choosing each other for all the years they had left, proving that sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes being set free means choosing to stay. Sometimes a trade made in anger and greed results in a love story that spans decades and generations. Sarah had been traded for 2 horses. The cowboy had set her free. She had chosen to stay with him. And together they had built a life worth living, a love worth having, a story worth telling. It was not the beginning she would have chosen, but it was the perfect foundation for everything that came after. Every happy year, every beloved child, every peaceful evening, every tender moment had grown from that single act of kindness on a street in Park City, Colorado, in the summer of 1878. Isaac had given Sarah her freedom, and Sarah had given Isaac her heart. It was a fair trade after all, better than fair. It was everything.